You go to bed at the end of the day feeling perfectly fine. You walk into your bedroom, you turn off the lamp on the nightstand, you pull the covers up to your chin and you close your eyes. You expect to wake up tomorrow morning when the sun comes through the blinds. It is the most normal, ordinary routine in the human experience. We think of the bedroom as a safe harbor. We think of sleep as a quiet time when the body simply powers down, like turning off the engine of a car in the driveway. For a very long time, I believed exactly that. I believed that what happened in the dark was just peaceful rest. But I am going to tell you something that took me decades to understand, and I had to lose good men to figure it out. What happens in that bed while you are unconscious is not a simple powering down. Your body has a night shift, and the things we do without thinking, the habits we have built up over a lifetime, can put our heart under the heaviest, most dangerous load of the entire 24-hour cycle. Back in the early 1970s, I worked alongside a man named Arthur. We were in a manufacturing plant up in Columbus, Ohio. Arthur was the kind of man who built his life on reliability. He was strong, he worked overtime without complaining, and he prided himself on never taking a sick day. We were young men then, raising families, paying mortgages, and we thought our bodies were made of the same steel we worked with on the factory floor. We thought if we could just push through the fatigue, everything would be fine. Arthur retired a few years before I did. He spent his days fixing up old cars in his garage and playing with his grandchildren. He was 68 years old, seemingly healthy, walked his dog every single morning. And then one Tuesday, I got a phone call from his brother. Arthur had passed away. His wife had found him in bed that morning, looking as peaceful as if he were still dreaming. The doctors called it a massive heart attack during the early hours of the morning. At the funeral, everybody stood around holding their coffee cups and shaking their heads. They all said the exact same thing. They said at least he went peacefully in his sleep. They said it was a blessing to go that way, just drifting off and not waking up. I nodded along with them because I did not know any better. But the truth is, what happened to Arthur was not peaceful at all. It was a mechanical failure. It was the devastating result of a silent strain that his heart had been fighting every single night for years, completely unnoticed. It was a battle fought in the dark, and his heart simply gave out because the load became too heavy to carry. I did not understand the reality of that silent struggle until I was well into my 70s, living down here in Scottsdale, Arizona. After my wife, Margaret, passed away in 2019, my own nights started to change. I was no longer sleeping through the night. I would wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning with a start. My chest would be heaving. I could feel my pulse hammering against the inside of my neck. My mouth would be as dry as dust, and the sheets would be damp with sweat. I would sit on the edge of the mattress, looking at the shadows on the wall, feeling completely exhausted but terrified to lie back down. I told myself it was just grief. I told myself it was just the reality of being an old man. But the body does not ask for things twice in the same way. When we are in our 30s, the warnings are loud. You lift something too heavy, and your back immediately tells you to stop. But after 60, the warnings become very quiet. A dry mouth, a little extra sweating, a feeling of heaviness in your legs when you stand up in the morning. Those are not just signs of getting older. They are the dashboard lights on your car blinking on, telling you that the engine is suffocating. I mentioned these rough nights to my son Daniel. Daniel is a physical therapist up in Denver, and he spends his life looking at how the human body moves and functions. He came down to visit me one weekend, and we were sitting out on the back patio early in the morning before the desert heat really set in. I told him how I was waking up gasping, how my heart felt like it was running a marathon while I was supposedly resting. Daniel set his coffee mug down and looked at me with that serious expression he gets when he is working. He explained something to me that fundamentally changed how I view sleep. He used a plumbing metaphor because he knows I understand things best when we talk about pipes and pressure. He asked me how I sleep. I told him I sleep flat on my back. Margaret used to nudge me in the ribs for decades because I snored so loudly. I always thought snoring was just the harmless sound of a tired working man getting his rest. Daniel told me that when we age, the muscles in our throat lose their tension. They get loose, they get relaxed. When you lie completely flat on your back, gravity takes all that relaxed soft tissue and pulls it straight down. It is exactly like taking a heavy brick and setting it down on top of a garden hose. The water stops flowing immediately. When you sleep on your back and that tissue collapses, the air stops flowing into your lungs. The pipe is closed. You are lying there, unconscious, and you are literally suffocating. Your lungs are completely empty. Your oxygen levels drop like a stone. Now, the brain is an incredible piece of machinery. It monitors everything. When it realizes that the oxygen is dropping, it hits the emergency panic button. It releases a massive flood of adrenaline into your bloodstream. Adrenaline is the chemical your body uses when you have to run away from a dangerous animal. It is designed to save your life in a crisis. That sudden flood of adrenaline acts like a violent jolt of electricity. It forces your throat muscles to snap open, and it forces you to take a giant, desperate gulp of air. You wake up for just a fraction of a second, just long enough to breathe, and then you fall right back to sleep without remembering it. Daniel explained that this was not happening to me once or twice a night. It was likely happening dozens, maybe hundreds of times. Every single time that pipe closed, my blood pressure shot through the roof. My heart had to pump with absolute desperation to push whatever little oxygen was left in my blood to my vital organs. Imagine trying to drive a car and slamming on the brakes, then immediately pressing the gas pedal all the way to the floor over and over again for 8 hours straight. That is what I was doing to my heart. The wear and tear from that constant high pressure damages the inner walls of your arteries. It creates tiny cracks where rust and plaque build up, exactly like hard water building up inside an old copper pipe. Eventually, the pipe gets so clogged and so stiff that the pressure blows it apart. That is what causes a stroke. That is what causes a massive heart attack in the middle of the night. I realized right then that Arthur had probably been fighting that exact same battle. His heart did not fail peacefully. It failed because it was exhausted from fighting for air every night for 20 years. That very day, I changed the way I sleep. I did not go out and buy expensive equipment right away. I started with a simple mechanical fix. I bought a heavy, firm body pillow. I lay down on my side and I wedged that firm pillow tightly against my back so that I could not roll over onto my back while I was asleep. I forced myself to stay on my side. By sleeping on my side, gravity was no longer pulling the tissue straight down into my throat. The pipe stayed open. The air kept flowing. The very first week I did that, the morning headaches I had been living with for years simply disappeared. My heart stopped racing in the dark. But that was only the first part of the puzzle. When those bad nights had first started happening, right after Margaret passed, I had made another mistake. A mistake that I know millions of older folks are making right now because they are exhausted and desperate for a full night of rest. I had gone to a doctor and asked for a chemical shortcut. I asked for sleeping pills. I just wanted something that would turn my brain off so I would not have to stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. I got a prescription and I started taking them. They worked in a sense. They knocked me out, but I would wake up the next morning feeling like my head was wrapped in thick wool. I felt unsteady on my feet. My daughter Laura, who has been a registered nurse in Phoenix for over 20 years, came over one Sunday and saw the little orange prescription bottle sitting on the kitchen counter next to my coffee maker. Laura is not someone who raises her voice, but when she cares about something, she looks you right in the eye and speaks very plainly. She sat me down at the kitchen island and told me that I was holding a lit match next to a powder keg. She explained that sleeping pills do not fix the reason why you are not sleeping. They just disable your body's alarm system. I want you to think about that engine parked on a steep hill again. When you take a strong sedative, it relaxes every single muscle in your physical body even more deeply than normal sleep does. It relaxes your arms, your legs, and crucially, it violently relaxes the muscles in your throat. If you already have a throat pipe that wants to collapse when you lie down, that pill acts like taking the emergency brake off the car. The pipe collapses faster, it collapses harder, and it stays closed for much longer. But here is the truly terrifying part that Laura made me understand. Because your brain is heavily sedated by the chemicals in the pill, it does not wake up to hit the panic button. The adrenaline does not fire in time. You lie there in the dark, suffocating silently, and your brain is too drugged to wake you up to gasp for air. Your heart is left completely alone, trying to pump thick, unoxygenated blood through a tight system. You are turning a mechanical breathing problem into a deadly cardiovascular emergency. And Laura brought up another point that shook me. She asked me what happens if I need to get up to use the bathroom at 2 in the morning while under the influence of that medication. In your 80s, your balance is not what it used to be. You get out of bed in the dark, your brain is foggy from the sedative, and your legs feel like rubber. You trip on the edge of the rug, you fall. A hip fracture at our age is not just a broken bone, it is often the end of living independently in your own home. It is a long, painful stay in a hospital bed where pneumonia and blood clots become very real threats. I looked at that orange bottle on the counter, realizing I was trying to fix a structural problem with a dangerous chemical mask. I walked over to the trash can and threw the bottle away. I decided right then that if I was going to fix my sleep, I had to fix the mechanics of my life, not just drug myself into ignoring the symptoms. That decision led me to look at the environment I was sleeping in. Growing up in the Midwest during the 1950s and 60s, we were terrified of the cold. The winters in Ohio were brutal. My father worked hard for the money to heat our house, and the rule was that you never let the heat escape. We kept the windows locked tight, we wore thick flannel pajamas, and we piled heavy wool blankets on top of the bed. We associated warmth with safety and comfort. When I retired and moved to the desert here in Arizona, I brought that old Midwest habit with me. Even in the dead of summer, when it was over 100 degrees outside, I would run the air conditioning just enough to take the edge off, maybe keeping the room around 75 or 76 degrees. I did not want to catch a chill. I slept under a heavy comforter. But I noticed that I was constantly tossing and turning. My legs felt restless. I would wake up with the collar of my shirt damp with sweat. I thought it was just poor circulation. I started reading up on how the human body actually transitions into deep sleep. It turns out millions of years of human biology cannot be ignored. In order for your brain to slip into the deepest, most restorative stages of sleep, the stages where your body actually repairs the cellular damage from the day, your internal core body temperature must drop by a couple of degrees. If you sleep in a hot, stuffy room piled under heavy synthetic blankets, you are fighting your own biology. Your body is trying desperately to vent its internal heat, but the environment will not allow it. Think about a car engine running hot on an August afternoon. What happens? The radiator fan kicks into high gear. The water pump works twice as hard. Your body does the exact same thing. When you are too warm in bed, your heart has to pump massive amounts of blood away from your internal organs and out to the surface of your skin to try and radiate the heat away. Your heart rate stays elevated. Your blood pressure stays up. You are forcing your heart to work the late shift, pumping aggressively all night long just to keep you from overheating. You cannot get deep rest if your engine is constantly running the cooling fans. I realized I was putting unnecessary miles on my heart just because I was stubbornly holding on to a habit from my childhood in Ohio. I changed the environment completely. I decided that a slightly higher electric bill was a lot cheaper than a stay in the cardiac ward. I set the thermostat down to 68 degrees every single night. I turned on the ceiling fan to keep the air moving, creating a breeze that naturally evaporates the heat off the skin. I took the heavy comforter and folded it up in the closet. I bought simple 100% cotton sheets that let the air flow through. The first night I slept in a truly cool room, the difference was profound. I slipped under the light sheet, and I could feel my body sigh with relief. I did not wake up kicking the covers off. My heart was not racing. It was the first time in years that the silence in my chest felt natural and calm. Your heart needs a cool room to slow down. It is a biological requirement, not a luxury. But getting the room cold and the pipe open was not enough. I had to look at the fuel I was putting into the machine and exactly when I was putting it in. Back in my working years, dinner was the main event of the day. You worked a tough shift, You came home tired, and you sat down at the table at 7 or 8 o'clock at night to a heavy plate of food. Meat, potatoes, gravy, maybe a slice of bread and butter. It was how we rewarded ourselves for a hard day. I kept that habit going well into my retirement. I would eat my largest, heaviest meal late in the evening, watch the evening news, and then head straight to bed. Let me translate what that does to your body using the factory floor. When you eat a large, heavy meal, you are turning on the heavy machinery of your digestive system. Processing a steak and potatoes requires a massive amount of energy. Your body has to divert huge volumes of blood flow down to your stomach and your intestines to break that food down. When you lie down flat in bed with a full stomach, you are doing two very dangerous things at once. First, structurally, your stomach is a pouch. When it is completely full of heavy food and strong digestive acids and you lay flat, that acid easily creeps back up the pipe into your chest. It causes a burning sensation that irritates your throat and forces you to wake up slightly, breaking your sleep cycle without you even realizing it. Second, and much more importantly for your heart, you are demanding that your cardiovascular system work at maximum capacity while you are trying to sleep. Your heart cannot clock out and rest if the stomach is running the heavy machinery on the factory floor. The heart has to stay on duty, pumping hard to support digestion. Your blood pressure refuses to lower. If you already have a bit of high blood pressure, adding a heavy late dinner is like trying to do preventive maintenance on a running engine while someone is pressing the gas pedal. The parts just wear out faster. You are forcing your body to stay in daytime active mode while you are lying in the dark. I had to break a habit I had held for 60 years. I made a hard, non-negotiable rule for myself. The kitchen closes at 5:30 in the afternoon. I eat my last main meal early, and I changed what that meal looks like. Instead of heavy red meat and starchy potatoes, I have a piece of baked fish or some grilled chicken and a large portion of steamed vegetables. Food that breaks down easily. Food that does not require the heavy machinery to run for hours. If I find myself genuinely hungry at 8 o'clock while I am reading a book, I will not open a box of cookies or eat ice cream. Sugar spikes your blood levels and forces your body into an alert state. I will have a very small handful of plain almonds or a cup of herbal tea. That is it. By the time 10 o'clock rolls around and my head hits the pillow, my stomach is quiet. The factory floor is swept, the machines are powered down, and my heart has absolutely nothing else to do but beat slowly, softly, and restfully. The lightness you feel going to bed with an empty stomach is the feeling of your heart finally getting a break. All of these changes, sleeping on my side, throwing away the pills, cooling the room, and eating early, brought me to the final and most fundamental truth about sleep. For a very long time, I treated sleep like an inconvenience. I treated it like a tax I had to pay to get to the next day. In our culture, we pride ourselves on how little sleep we can get by on. I used to tell people I only needed 5 hours a night. I wore it like a badge of honor, like it proved I was tough and resilient. That is the kind of foolish, ignorant pride that puts good men in the ground early. Sleep is not lost time. It is not wasted time. Sleep is the only time your body allows the maintenance crew onto the factory floor. During the day, just by living, breathing, and walking around, you are causing microscopic damage to your blood vessels. The stress of paying bills, the sugar in your coffee, the physical exertion of walking up the stairs, all of it creates tiny amounts of inflammation and wear and tear in your arteries. It demands consistency. I started treating my bedtime with the same respect I used to treat my clock-in time at the manufacturing plant. 10 o'clock at night, the lights go out. I get my 7 to 8 hours. When I wake up, the first thing I do is walk out onto the patio and let the morning Arizona sun hit my face for 10 minutes. That natural light resets the biological clock in my brain, telling it exactly when the day begins, which ensures it knows exactly when to shut down at night. The thing I want you to understand, the lesson that changed everything for me, is that after 60, the independence we all want to desperately keep is protected in the quiet habits nobody else sees. The damage I did in my younger years, the years of heavy dinners and sleeping flat on my back, that wear and tear is still inside me. I cannot erase the past, but I stopped adding to it. We spend so much time worrying about the obvious things. We worry about walking a certain number of steps, or we worry about avoiding salt, but then we spend a third of our lives suffocating our engine in the dark. You do not have to make all these changes tonight. That is too much for anyone to handle all at once. If you try to fix everything, you will get overwhelmed and you will fix nothing. Just pick one thing. Just one. Recognize your own routine. Maybe tonight you just locate a firm pillow and wedge it behind your back so you stay on your side. Maybe you just turn the thermostat down 3 degrees before you pull the covers up. Maybe you decide to eat your dinner 2 hours earlier than usual. The human body is an incredibly forgiving machine. It wants to heal. If you just take your foot off the brake, if you just clear the pipe and cool the engine down, your heart will start repairing itself the very first night. I learned these lessons too late to share them with Arthur. But you are sitting here today and you still have time. You have the capacity to give your heart the rest it has earned after carrying you through all these decades. I am glad we could sit down and talk about this today. Take care of yourself, take care of your heart in the dark, and I will see you next time.